My name is Wielgopolan. I work in Institute of Geophysics, Polish Academy of Sciences, and today we're going to talk about great migrations in animal kingdom. So, like I said, today's topic is animal migration, and it is one of the most fascinating wildlife spectacles known to human eye. It has fascinated humans for years, for millennia actually, and for a very good reason. Because some of most astonishing features of endurance, of strength, of power are performed by those long distance migrants. So today we're going to find out what migration is and why some animals choose this strategy. Why is it good, but also what are the dangers brought by migration? What are different strategies taken by animals who migrate? How is it ruled? How is it managed? What are triggering mechanisms? How do animals navigate? How is it possible that they are able to survive a long journey? Again, why is it dangerous, and why some of them do not, unfortunately, are not able to survive? And how do we cope with tracking it, with measuring it? How does science cope with that? And at the very end, we're going to learn 5 top is chosen by me, amazing stories of specific migratory animals. So first of all, what is migration? It's not every movement that animal makes, because it's a relatively long distance movement for starters, of individuals, of populations, usually on seasonal basis. So it's first of all, it's seasonal. So the trigger for the migration, the reason may be local climate, availability of food, or mating reasons. But to be counted as true migration, not just dispersal, local dispersal, the movement should be, like I said, annual or seasonal, like, for example, in Northern Hemisphere, birds migrating south for the winter, and wild beasts, we're going to talk about this later, migrating annually for seasonal search of food, for grazing. But what is most important, what makes migration different, is change of habitat for the part of their life. For example, like young Atlantic salmon, which is leaving the river of their birth and go to the sea. So this is a change of habitat from fresh water to salty oceanic water. So what sets migration apart from other forms of movement is it involves traveling from one type of habitat to another. So which group of animals do that? Well, we are accustomed to migratory birds. There's, for example, the term migratory birds in Polarpedia, and this is what we usually associate with migration. Because we observe them very often, even if in our EDU-ARCTIC monitoring systems we note very first appearance of particular birds such as Arctic tern, cuckoo, or crane, and those are all migratory birds, of course. And this is first appearance when they come back from southern region. So migratory birds are first thing that comes to our mind, but frankly, migration is happening in all major branches, groups of animal kingdom, like birds, of course, but also mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, or even insects and crustaceans. So it is quite common. So like I said, most people think it's mostly a seasonal movement of flocks of birds we can observe between breeding and not breeding sites, but in fact it happens, it's a biological phenomenon that happens in every group, and it's a very common strategy to survive harsh or changing environment if the animals choose not to hibernate, because they usually either hibernate or migrate during harsh time of the year. So here we can observe some of the famous migrators, like Guinness Records. For example, like I said, even crustaceans migrate. So this is zooplankton, like crab larvae, copepods. They are the smallest migrants on Earth, 1 or 2 millimeters long. In contrast, the largest migrant is blue whale, which is even almost 30 meters long, oceanic mammal, of course. The longest mammal migration record belongs to another whale, another oceanic mammal. This is a humpback whale, a little smaller, but the route it takes is the longest. It's up to 8,500 kilometers each way. Also, at the end, we're going to talk about the longest insect migrations, and the record belongs to Monarch Butterfly, Danaus flexipus, and it takes the route of up to almost 5,000 kilometers. And the round trip belongs to our Arctic animal, Arctic bird. This is Arctic tern. This is the longest record round trip from northern to southern polar region. It's 40,000 kilometers, one way. And for example, the highest migration altitude that record belongs to bar-headed goose that travels at the altitude of 9,000 kilometers, which is very, very high, higher than at the altitude of planes. So, like I said, there are different strategies of migration. Basically, there are 3 main patterns of migration. Diurnal movements, that means day and night movements. You can see it here on the image. And seasonal movements and long distance journeys. As for diurnal movements, for example, it is the case of planktonic organisms in water column. For example, copepods, that is zooplankton, move up during the night in the water column and down to the depth during the day. It's a so-called vertical diurnal migration. So also we have seasonal movements when, for example, deers move up to the mountains in summer and to the valleys in winter in search of. Right. So we're saying that in search of food is one of the reasons, and it is basically one of the main reasons why animals migrate. Because migration is driven by a very simple fact that resources on Earth fluctuate, that they're not constant. So we have warm summer months, and then they are followed by inhospitable cold. Like I wrote in the beginning, today Warsaw is maybe not that cold, but rather snowy. So plants or other meals may be one time in the summer abundant, but only for a short time. So sometimes the best place to give birth or hatch eggs may not be a good place to find food. So while migrations can be complex, the motivations behind them are quite simple. So food, breeding, and climate. So those are the recurring things. In search of food, in search of good habitat for breeding, animals choose to travel. But how do they know if they don't have a clock or calendar? How do they know when to start and when to come back? It's basically a combination of internal signs like hormones that trigger, for example, an urge to eat. At some point, organism is excreting lots of hormones that tell an animal you have to eat. You have to eat a lot. You have to mate. you have to reproduce. So these are the internal mechanisms that trigger some behavior, and then there are the external signs, like temperature change, daylight hours, and of course the food, the scarce food supply. So as for this light, it is and daylight hours, it is a very, very important factor. It's so-called photoperiod. Photoperiod is the amount of light that there is available in the day. So when the days get shorter, that is a hint, well, we should think of preparing ourselves to migrate. And so those are the mechanisms. And like I said, there's a round trip and return trip, which is seasonal. And what is interesting, sometimes it takes the whole lifetime or even more to complete the migration journey. That means that the same organism that began the journey is not going to complete it. It's not going to come back to the same place. And this is the case of, for example, insects. Monarch butterfly. It takes more than one generation to complete the journey. So, where do animals move? The routes are very, very different. So they go north, they go south, they go east and west, they go up to the mountains, back to the sea, up the rivers, and I'd like to show you a short time lapse provided thanks to a website you can enter as well. I'll write it on chat. It's movebank.org. I will write it while the video will be on. There's this website that's showing day by day how migrating animals move, thanks to the tracking. And this shows what happened in April last year. What you can see here in red are animals moving constantly. In the sea, on the land, in the air, there's a constant movement. More intense here. Those are mainly birds from northern Europe going south. That was August, going to Africa for winter, and so on and so on. So you can observe it, of course, on your own. It's quite impressive. To me, it reminds a little bit map of how planes move, and this is quite intense, and we don't always see that in our everyday life, but it happens every day. So, how do they manage that? If you had to imagine an ideal migrant animal, what do you think? What would be the traits? What would it have to be like? First, an ideal, non-existent migrant. Yeah, Arabic capacity. Yes. So our migratory demon can serve as a starting point for discussing migration performance in real migrants. So the problems to solve are navigation, how to store energy, how to get food en route, and also how to endure during the journey. First of all, as for navigation, look at the picture here. There's an interesting fact that, for example, birds take into account influence of wind on their movement when they're choosing direction. So if they want to go here, northeast, this is where what they want to reach, they actually go straight north, because if the wind is in this direction, if this is the western wind, so they know that the wind is going to influence how they are going to perform their route. And it's exactly the same if they want to go this way. So they need to take into account various things like winds, for example. So about navigation, finding the route, there are many navigation mechanisms, and not all of them are already well recognized by us. So, for example, there are landmarks. Animals are remembering landmarks like rivers, like mountains, like coastline, everything that is easy to remember and could show the route. This is basically how humans act also if they don't have a GPS. And another thing is sun orientation. So the animal will orient their body at a certain angle in relation to the sun at a particular time of the day. So, so this external factor, like sunlight, activates a part of the brain which is necessary for navigation. So that is to say that if animal leaves nest in the morning when the sun is low in the sky, and is planning to head in some direction, will travel in certain direction with the sun in a position related to its body. It's called an internal sun compass. Okay, but animals don't only travel in the plain sun. Sometimes there's no sun visible. Sometimes they travel at night. So there's also night sky orientation. Night sky orientation has been proven in a pioneering experiment, and a scientist colloquially showed that some birds kept in a planetarium that was showing the night sky, oriented themselves towards the south. So, and when the planetarium sky was slowly rotated, the birds maintained their orientation with respect to the stars. So they know the stars and can orient themselves by the stars. So some birds, but also not only birds that are quite we would say developed organisms, but also beetles, so insects, are able to use night sky orientation. Another thing is magnetoreception, and magnetoreception is a very interesting pattern or mechanism. So it's like reading geomagnetic information from the Earth to use it for orientation. So, for example, there was also an experiment where certain birds were kept in a cage. This is a quite cool experiment, actually. They were kept in a cage, but they were so eager, so willing to migrate that even then they were kept in a cage, they wanted to go south, for example, in fall, even though there was no food, the food wasn't scarce, it wasn't cold, so it was an internal mechanism telling them we need to go south. And where is the south? It was recognized thanks to magnetic mechanism. So if the magnetic field is changed, so the magnetic south appears in a different direction, and that can be done in a controlled laboratory environment. So birds will assemble in new directions. So they recognize where south is, not by a certain map, but by geomagnetic signal. So this behavior was proven in 1960 in Germany. So it was demonstrated for the first time that migratory birds indeed use some magnetic clues. But how do they do that? You can see here on this image that birds have a special organ in their ears. It's a magnetite. We could say it's a tiny piece of iron working as a tiny compass. So that's one thing, that's magnetite, but also there's cryptochronite. In their eyes, there's something, an organ, we might say, called cryptochronite, that allows them to see magnetic fields in a way, see it with their eyes. Another mechanism is olfaction, and olfaction is related to smelling, because olfactory navigation has been suggested, for example, for pigeons. Pigeons are said to build and remember like a mental map of smells, of odors in their area, and recognize where they are by local odors. And it's the very same case not only for pigeons, but also for salmon. So olfaction is also a very interesting, not that well-known mechanism. And also there is echolocation, known for use for by bats, by dolphins. That means there are standing waves that are returning to them, and this is how they navigate. So many organs, many adaptations are used by migratory animals to cope. Why is migration dangerous? In many ways, there are many dangers that can be encountered, like bad weather, snow, rain, storms, also predators. Some of them are using, some of them, like for example, bears, brown bears, know when salmon migrate and when they're mostly vulnerable, and they're waiting for them to hunt easily. So predators also use those mechanisms. Exhaustion and starvation, even though animals try to prepare themselves, the journey may remain very long. They may not be able to hunt on the way, and yes, there's also the danger that they won't find enough food. Getting lost, even though all those mechanisms work, sometimes it is also possible to get lost, especially if they're based on landmarks, and humans change those landmarks. They build routes that can seem like rivers, for example. So birds or other animals are confused and get lost. As for this human impact, of human infrastructure, there's also possible collision with man-made objects, barriers, like ductworks, like electricity lines, roads, bridges, etc., etc. So lots of non-natural barriers are created by humans. Also, catastrophes like oil spills are very dangerous for traveling animals. And another way that humans are dangerous to migratory animals too is hunting. Still present here, like nets and guns, hunters and poachers. For example, you can see stork here. It is a very popular, we would say, a national bird in Poland, but also in France. But those animals, those birds, are still hunted, for example, in Malta. So many of them do not come back because they're simply hunted. So, how to prepare for such danger? Of course, such a long, tough journey requires preparation. So, like I said in the beginning, there is a hormone signal that's triggering we need to eat. So it's triggering a huge appetite. So animals start to eat voraciously, eat whatever they find, concentrate, focus on finding food, and as a result, they are gaining significant amounts of weight. They even supplement their normal diet with other things like fruits, grains, even if they normally eat just insects. Anything that can be converted into body fat is good to be consumed, so that animals can gain as much energy magazine as possible. Because for example, it's necessary because during the journey, some birds can lose up to half of their body weight during the journey, so they need to have extra fat. So those hormonal signals make animals really restless at nighttime. They constantly looking for food. Another thing is that they start to molt. Molt, that means that they're changing their, for example, birds are changing their feathers. So they lose their old feathers and they gain more nice, strong feathers that keep them warm and allow them to fly fast during migration. And so these are those changes in behavior, like eating, physiological changes, like this summer to fall molt. And what happens during the journey? It's still all about energy conserving. So many species, you might see that they don't fly alone, they fly together in a certain formation, because that way they can have optimal flight power and they can keep optimal distance, and they save energy. The energy expenditure is reduced. So of course there's also better orientation and communication. What you see here is the famous so-called V formation. It's a shape of V letter that is optimal for minimum energy expenditure. So we could ask ourselves if it's an instinct or learned behavior. Well, you can see here a comparison between instincts and learned behaviors, and generally migration is instinctive because it happens without previous experience, without any guidance. However, if they're learned with age and they're able to survive following cycles of migration, it is crucial for their survival. They're getting better and better with practice. Everything. So migratory routes, for example, are taught also by older members of the group in case of birds. So yes, it is instinctive, but it doesn't mean that young birds, like animals, don't need some guidance and don't learn with age. So how do we know this? How are we able to track this movement that I showed you before? So historically, it was first recorded very long time ago, 3,000 years ago, by ancient Greeks like Homer, Aristotle, and for certain species like storks, like turtle doves, like swallows, so birds mainly. Then there were some other research following arrival of spring migrants. For example, in the beginning of 19th century, American scientists wondered, he was called James Audubon, wondered whether migrating birds return to the same place each year or not. So he tied a string around the leg of a bird before it flew south. So the following spring, he saw the bird indeed did come back. Now we have, of course, more modern technologies than tying a string, but it's basically the same rule, because we use metal rings for birds, but this requires catching the bird and catching to put the ring and then catching it back to read the message. There are also plastic stickers that are attached to very tiny animals, like you can see here this migratory butterfly. There's a plastic sticker attached to its wing. Like I said, there's this free online database of animal tracking data, and also we can help animal tracking and tracking researchers to manage, to share, to protect, archive their data. This is more or less something like our monitoring system. This is the MoveBank.org I showed you before. So now we'll end with 5 most amazing top migratory stories that would be that I find particularly interesting. Humpback whale, Arctic tern, monarch butterfly, wild beast, and salmon, and they're particularly interesting for various reasons. First of all, something you may have heard of. It is one of the most well-known and also the most massive migrations, most spectacular too. It's the Great Serengeti wild beast migration. Wild beast is basically gnu. This is this animal. So during this journey, vast numbers of Serengeti wild beasts, accompanied by zebras, gazelles, and other animals, move in annual pattern which is fairly very predictable. So they look for grazing areas. They look for fresh grass, basically. And also better water quality. So the exact timing of migration is dependent upon the rainfall patterns each year. So it's not beginning at the same time, exactly the same day every year, but each year around the same time. So it begins in Ngorongoro conservation area in southern Serengeti in Tanzania, and it loops clockwise like this, in search, like it's following good fresh grass and fresh quality water quality. But it's not only, like I said, it's a very dangerous venture, we would say, because, for example, during crossings of certain rivers like Grumeti or Mara rivers, in the beginning of July, they are very popular safari attractions. But why are they so popular? Also for a quite cruel reason, because crocodiles already know that at that time there is going to abandon food, lots of those animals passing. So they're just lying in wait to hunt. And not only for this reason, but also because of exhaustion, etc., etc., for thirst, hunger, predation, to about 250,000 wild beasts die during the journey. 250,000 of animals die. So, well, it's quite difficult for them. Just let me. No, it's not. Yeah, it's this one.
Hi, I'm Wielgopolan. And I'm Matt Bardi. So with Serengeti in northern Tanzania, photographed the annual wildebeest migration. Here we are watching our first river crossing. It's an amazing experience watching so many creatures backing against the rock.
So this is how it looks like, quite spectacular. I don't know if you noticed that I said 250,000 wild beasts died during the journey, but in one journey, herds of more than 2 million animals gathered. So it is quite spectacular. Another and completely different of migratory travel are salmon fishes. And salmon fishes have one of the most impressive migratory powers in animal kingdom, because they traverse between completely different environments, between freshwater and salt water. So after hatching the eggs, salmons remain in fresh river waters for 2-3 years, and for next 3-4 years they are preparing to live in salt water. And in that time they develop their reproductive capacity, and so they migrate to salty water, and after that they migrate back to fresh water, and in the exact same river where they were born, return their home for spawning. That means to hatch eggs. So they use various techniques like detecting magnetic field and also olfaction, like I said, sense of smell that helps them find the route that they can take up to 4,000 kilometers. But what is more specific about salmon fish, that way of adaptation to live between two different environments. Because salmon is an anadromous fish. What does it mean, anadromous? That is exactly that they traverse between fresh water and salty water. And how is that even possible? There are two completely different environments requiring different adaptations. So, like I said, after hatching, their salmons remain in rivers for 2-3 years, and in that time they undergo many changes in physiological changes and behavioral changes. For example, it's related with osmosis, with drinking and not drinking water, with osmoregulation, and it's a process called smoltification. Smoltification is, you look at those two fish. These are both, this is salmon and this is salmon. This is exactly the same fish, the same individual, but before and after smoltification. They adapt to this different environment. In many ways, they have special, and they create special enzymes. Their kidneys function differently into habitats, and etc., etc. So there are various adaptations, and smoltification is the most spectacular one of them. Mostly, it's not only what they looked like, but also basically mechanism of osmoregulation. There is also this humpback whale, a giant one, as you can see here, related to a bass. It's a giant animal. It's not the biggest whale, not the biggest of all whales on Earth, but it makes the longest migration of any mammal in the world. Like I said, it can be 20 meters long and weigh up to 40 tons, so it's really a giant. And they travel through every part of world ocean and cover the distance of 22,000 kilometers each and every year. So they spend summer season near polar regions of north and of south. They feed on krills, plankton, smaller fishes. But in the beginning of winter season, they migrate to equator, and they mate and give birth to calves here near the equator. And this is also a change of environment from very cold one to rather warm one. And during this migration, for example, females and small whales move at first in groups for safety. And I hope you can listen to this beautiful song by a humpback whale. No, this is not it. I hope you can hear it. If not, I will send you the link. Okay, so that was a very beautiful, unique song by humpback whale. Like I said, the females in small ways move together, and mothers and their young calves swim close together, often touching each other with slippers, and that appears to be a gesture of affection. Arctic tern, an absolute migratory top animal, top bird, flying from north to south and covering during its life of 30 years or more, covering the distance of 2.4 million kilometers, and it is equal to 3 trips to the moon and back. So how do they survive? They have so-called fuel stops. They stop to gain some energy to hunt. They hunt for small fish and crustaceans. And also, how do they manage to travel? They appear to be following huge wind patterns in the atmosphere, and that's how they avoid flying into the wind. They just fly with the wind, and wind helps them cover the distance. And the last, but not least one, it's a monarch butterfly. And monarch butterfly looks like this. You may know him. It's most familiar in North America, and it's an iconic pollinator species. Its migration is one of the most spectacular natural phenomena in the world. So the monarch migration usually starts in about October each year, can start earlier sometimes. So starting with September, October, eastern and northeastern populations migrate from southern Canada and United States to wintering sites in central Mexico. They arrive here around November. Then they start the return trip in March and arrive around July. But the thing is, no individual butterfly completes the entire round. So the female monarch lays eggs for the next generation during the migration, and so not even one individual sees the whole cycle. Please note that adult butterfly lives 2 to 6 weeks. So this is quite extraordinary. What kind of instinct drives them to do that, even though they will never see the end of their journey. So it should be also noted that monarch butterfly is lovely. I'm going to show you a shot footage for the end. Lovely, but also very poisonous. That is why it is marked with those bright colors as a warning sign for predators. But how do they get poisonous is also interesting, because they do not produce poison themselves. They feed on poisonous plants. It's a milkweed, and at their larva stage they eat it, and then the toxins from this plant accumulate in their bodies, and this is how they become poisonous. So the most incredible thing, like I said, is none of them live long enough to complete the journey, but also they have remarkable abilities to navigate, to find the route. For example, chemical markers. They mark trees for orientation for others. They also, just as exactly as birds, follow the position of the sun thanks to cryptochrome in their antenna. They also recognize geographical features, landmarks also. They take into account what happens in the terrain. They recognize it. So, like I said, this recent hypothesis suggests that monarchs may be chemically marking certain trees using some substance that we still don't know, orienting themselves when they return the following winter. But remember, the same one won't return. The others will return, and they're using their abilities for others to come back to complete their journey. So just to end, I'll try and show you the life cycle and of monarch butterfly. So this is larva eating this milkweed and gaining toxin. So during this phase we have metamorphosis. And the full-grown adult butterfly is born. So this is it for today.